board, not just them.
Thanks, everybody. We're now live streaming the March 11th meeting of the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board. Before we begin, I'm just going to go over to Jake just to confirm. We have directors Lee, Grieve, and Arbor here in the room and online, if you wouldn't mind listing.
Thanks, Chair Hamir. Yep, so what I've, just to confirm the attendance here, participating via Zoom, we've got directors Abram, Adams, Anderson, Colborne, Cole Hamilton, Cornfield, Davis, alternate director Dahl, Director Lee is in attendance here in the civic room, Director Hillian, Morin, McCollum, Unger, Wally, alternate director Bissinger, Director Moglove, alternate directors Minions and Coulson, and therefore the only absent director that I'm aware of at this time. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Director Kerr has also joined us as well. So only alternate director Sullivan, I believe, is absent.
And if we missed anybody, just let us know. So moving on with the agenda, we have adoption of the minutes from January 14th.
Move the adoption of the January 14th, 2020 minutes.
Director Cornfield, and seconded by Director Adams. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. And we have no business arising or petitions and delegations. So item number F is regarding public input of the 2021-2025 financial plan for receipt. Moved by Director Lee, second by Director Arbor, and over to staff.
Thank you, Chair and Directors, and Jake Martins will just provide an update on this item.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. So annually, as part of the development of the financial plan, the CVRD and Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board make available to the public the draft financial plans and invite comments or questions respecting that through our website. To date, we have received no input from the public regarding this. However, again, those opportunities are still available to put forward regarding any of the services that are provided.
Does anyone have any comments or questions on this report? Director Cornfield?
And just very quickly, a process question. Do we ever have like a public session where people could make a presentation and like today's board meeting? Is that part of the process, or is that just separate online, what you submit in writing?
Thanks through the chair. Yeah, so at this time, given the pandemic, certainly much of the comments or opportunities are virtual in nature. However, there is always the opportunity to request to appear as a delegation to provide dedicated comments to the board on any matter. But yeah, to date, we have received no such requests.
Okay, so to appear before the board, it would be at their request. We don't have an open session that people could come and make comments online.
One has not been set this year.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I don't see any other comments or questions. Is anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing none, that's carried. So moving on to reports. The first report is the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Advisory Committee meeting from February 25th for receipt. Director Lee and Director Grieve. Anyone have any comments on that report? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. Item number 2, solid waste management plan, targeted amendments for the regional composting facility for receipt.
So moved.
Director Unger,
Second.
and was that Director Hillian? Okay, thank you. Staff are way better hearing voices. So over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and I'd like to introduce Cole Mackinson again. And just to introduce Cole and advise that Cole is now in the permanent position of the Manager of Capital Projects for the solid waste. So I welcome Cole. He's been filling in this position on a temporary basis, but has been awarded this. So Cole will lead you on this particular report and the recommendations provided and answer any of your questions.
Thank you through the CEO, through the chair. So based on feedback from the MOE last year in March 2020, the board approved to initiate the targeted amendment for the 2013 solid waste management plan in support of the regional compost facility. The current solid waste management plan supports organic diversion, but required specific wording regarding the organics facility and the transfer station. We've been working with Sperling Hansen, our compost design engineer and solid waste consultant, and they've developed a targeted amendment based on ministry guidelines. This is further supported through the extensive public engagement that has been taking place last year and currently ongoing through March next week with more open houses and First Nation engagement and collaboration with our municipal partners in this project. So the approval of the targeted amendment will be an important step to move forward the construction of the regional organics compost facility. We'll be looking to put this forward to the ministry for approval prior to construction.
Thank you, Cole. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, hearing none on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. And we have a recommendation that the targeted amendment to the 2013 Comox Strathcona Waste Management Solid Waste Management Plan be submitted to the Ministry of Environment.
Move the recommendation.
Director Cole Hamilton and Director Hillian. And any comments or questions on that recommendation? Hearing none, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Year-end review of the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Illegal Dumping Prevention Program for receipt.
Question, Chair.
Oh, yes.
Did we do the second half of that? You mentioned that we submit the targeted amendment. But there was a second half, and that was a target amendment be provided to the participating municipalities.
Apologies. Shall we do we'll do a second motion? Is that, or? It was, okay, staff are advising that it was captured, but so just so that everybody knows, it is the whole recommendation that is listed in your agenda.
Good, thank you. So when we, rather than just saying the, yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you for that. All right, so moving on into the illegal dumping prevention program. Moved by Director Grieve. Second by Director
Second,
Lee.
Director.
Oh, Director Colburn, we'll have you. And over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. Mike Dennison from our bylaw services is here to provide this annual report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, through the CEO, through the chair. This report covers the illegal dumping program statistics collected throughout the service area in 2020. As for Appendix A of the report, you can see that we've had a slight decrease in the number of reports presented to us. So in 2018, we saw 105 reports of illegal dumping. 2019, that was down to 94. 2020, we're down to 92. So across the service area, the area with the most reports was CVRD Area C with 20 reports of illegal dumping. City of Courtenay had 14 reports. SRD Area D had 12 reports. And the City of Campbell River had 11 reports. Of the 92 reports in 2020, 58 were in regional district and 34 in the municipalities. We did not see any significant spike noted during COVID, which is good, although the illegal dumping problem continues. On average, we have 7 reports received and entered into the database per month. So that equates, since the program launched in 2017, 386 reports and about 142,000 kilograms of waste removed from the service area. In 2020, the 92 reports equaled out to 23,190 kilograms removed. And as comparison, in 2019, there was 28,880 kilograms removed. Of the reports we received, about 13% leads to something traceable for us to follow up on, either through ticketing or warning letters being issued. A good point is since 2017, since the program launched, we have not had repeat offenders identified, which is a good thing. We're no longer seeing large construction waste sites that we used to see when this program was first launched. Our illegal dumping webpage continues to be a great source for the communities. It's updated with current stats, promotes our education and enforcement aspects of the program, and is an excellent source for information on how to properly dispose and report violations. When we find sites, we continue to post our temporary signage, which has been receiving positive feedback. It's very visible and clear on the fact that there's fines that can be issued on this and how to report these violations. So we get a lot of good feedback on that. We've noted that sites that contain free items that could have been properly disposed at one point was as high as 80%, is down to about 57%. So even with the closure of 2 recycling depots, residents do not appear to be just dumping elsewhere. Unfortunately, the number of sites with drywall containing asbestos increased from 0 sites in 2019 to 4 in 2020. COVID may be affecting the increase because of increase in house rentals. For this year, we envision 3 community cleanups. We're looking at the city of Campbell River area, Zabalis area, and possibly Denman Island. We continue to rely heavily on our volunteers in the regional districts. And we very much appreciate the volunteers and how they help us with these cleanups. Actually, one of our volunteers, James Barth, will soon be reaching 100 tons of materials removed, which is credited to his volunteer group. And we continue to utilize the CSWM educational staff to reach out to school-aged children to promote illegal dumping through art projects, promotional gift ideas, and flyers that they can take home to their parents, because we strongly believe that promoting the program at a young age is very beneficial, especially during Earth Week. And that basically sums up the report. Any questions?
We do have a few questions. We'll go to Director Anderson.
Thank you. I just note that there isn't necessarily always a direct correlation between effort made and result that we see on the ground. We certainly hope there is, and I certainly applaud our efforts to do so, but it's always hard to know what has what effect. But my question simply is, do we address all of the dump sites that are reported to us? And are those all through volunteer effort? And would some financial allocation for paid time support us to address other sites that aren't getting cleaned up? Just what is the correlation between reporting and our ability to respond? Thank you.
Yeah, within the regional district, we do rely on volunteers for our cleanups, and they pretty much assist us with every site. Or we utilize the timber companies or the BC Hydro if it's in their areas. Within the municipalities, it's Public Works that will generally do the cleanups.
And so are all sites that are reported to us remediated or cleaned up?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Director Anderson. I have Director Cole Hamilton and then Director Grieve.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you for the report. I was interested to see that there was a slightly lower, I think it was 92 rather than 94 incidents of illegal dumping in last year versus the year before. And I was just curious, we closed the unsupervised recycling depots July 1st last year. Was there any variation within the year? Were we seeing an increase in the second half of the year after the closures, or was it fairly much a flat line? Hoping it was a flat line, indicating that that didn't have an impact on illegal dumping.
I would say it was a flat line. There wasn't anything significant there.
Okay, that's really encouraging, because that was one of the concerns that many of us had when making the closures. That's good to have that report in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Dennison, for that. Couple of questions. First one, how do we compare with neighboring regional districts with our illegal dumping? Because I know there's been a concerted effort to coordinate on the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities group. So I'm just wondering how do we compare, say, per capita on a rough average? You have those figures at all?
I'm sorry, I don't have any figures on that. Sorry, I don't have any figures on that. I know Regional District and Nanaimo is pushing for a province-wide solution to the illegal dumping issues. And we're certainly interested in seeing how that's going. But I think we have one of the more proactive programs out there, for sure.
And further to that, what would you say would be the percentage of people that we actually managed to track down from, letters and things that are left in the refuse? Do you have any idea?
It's about 13% year to year. So I can tell you that since we launched, well, actually, in 2020, we issued one $500 fine and 6 written warnings. Since the launch, there's been 10 people identified, issued $500 fines and 33 written warnings, and no challenges in court to date.
And no repeat offenders. Thank you.
No repeat offenders.
Thank you. Director Cornfield, and then I have Director Lee. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, and Director Morin, sorry. I know your hand was up and down, so it's Cornfield, Morin, and Lee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My question is, how can I best say this? We have like Uplands as a place that contractors can take material and dump it outside of our landfills. And it's part of the mining process. If you're mining gravel, then you've got to reclaim and they dump stuff in there. So do we have any, because a lot of times that material that's being dumped, and especially the stuff that causes us problem, is construction and demolition waste. And I wondered, do we have a list or an inventory of legal but private facilities that accept waste product that could maybe be of use to preventing illegal dumping if it's an alternate that others could use?
My response, I'm more the enforcement side of things, so I'd have to kind of refer that to the general manager, I think, to see if he would have any comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the CEO and through the chair. We do have a very good knowledge of the private facilities and the services that they offer throughout the service area. So I would say yes, we're aware of their abilities and the types of materials that they accept and the different industries that they service.
Hey, have we talked to them at all to see if their volumes have gone up at all?
No, I don't think so. Not as part of this evaluation on
Okay,
illegal dumping.
and no connection with them to see what role they could play to prevent illegal dumping?
No, we have not had that discussion.
Thank you.
Hey, Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I was curious, I noticed that there are a few illegal dumping report sites on social media, public shaming sites, if you will. And sometimes people are identified through their mail or through their, if it's a business, sometimes there's identification or whatever. I just wondered if you knew whether any of those reports are getting to us, or is this just basically a venting situation and those reports are not necessarily coming our way. I did notice that I think Campbell River actually has 2 social media sites. I don't know if that has anything to do with their reports going down a bit this year, but I was just curious whether anyone monitors those sites, or if any if you're aware of any reports coming out of those social media sites our way.
Yes, thank you. We actually do monitor those. We get a lot of feedback from, again, our volunteers on the chatter on social media, and they give us all kinds of information, and that does allow us to trace back to a lot of these people. And again, we do appreciate that for sure.
Well, that's great to know that social media is actually being helpful in that regard, and that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Director Lee and then Director Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question through the chair to staff is we have the report, all poachers and polluters provincial program through the Conservation Office, and they have billboards up on the highway to encourage people to report polluters. Their fines are substantially more than $500. I think they can go up to 10 grand. And I'm just wondering if we know how many polluters they have stopped and fined, and if we include those in our calculations of how many we've got, and also whether we might want to look at increasing the fine level to be a little bit more congruent with the RAP program.
The RAP program is something that we use at our partners in this thing. We do share information with them. Unfortunately, I would say they don't really share anything back with us. I don't have their stats on how many they deal with. I can ask them once in a while and they'll give us some stuff, but not generally. They do not feed us information. But any identified people that we ticket or send warning letters to, we always CC them so they're aware of some of the issues in their area. And as far as increased fines, it's not something we've discussed at this point. The program is still quite new.
Just press your button.
I would like the staff to flag the fine level and review it to see whether we can raise the fine beyond 500. I think it would be a deterrent. So if we could just have staff, consider that for next year's budget. Thank you.
And it sounds staff are nodding their heads and they're taking that feedback. Thank you. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm sorry, whenever I hear letters under the garbage, I immediately think of Arlo Guthrie and Alice's Restaurant. But I want to talk more about specifically about illegal dumping of organics and garden waste. I've noticed a real spike in illegal dumping in the Campbell River area of brush and branches. And ever since the yard waste depot was shut down here, and I don't really see that showing up in the statistics that were given to us. But I know both from my observation and anecdotally that it has spiked in the Campbell River area, and along with that, a huge, I believe, anger in the community, sometimes directed at me as I walk along the street and people are pruning their trees, about the cost of dumping branches in Campbell River. So I just maybe would like a comment on that.
Would staff like to comment?
Yeah, in terms of the increase, the statistics that we've collected aren't reflecting that increase. So, that's all that we can really say about that. In terms of the cost, this is something that the board looked at the last meeting, was waiving or reducing the tipping fees at the landfill for yard waste, but it was determined not to do that. And I do understand that in the future, with the implementation of a curbside program, that this will be resolved for the city, but that's where it is for now.
If I could just follow up on that comment, I don't think the or the street side, curbside pickup is going to address the volume that we're seeing dumped. I mean, nobody is going to cut their trees and limbs into 18-inch pieces and put them out at the curb. It's just not going to happen.
Thank you for that. We have Director Arbor.
Thank you. Yeah, and in regards to the organics, following on Director Kerr's comments, I think I was really heartened this year through our fire departments in the Comox Valley that we started doing chipping through the Fire Smart program. And we've had some really good discussions at the electoral areas at our last meeting, because whereas this program currently is really looking at fire risk reduction, we also see a lot of cool benefits around air quality and probably less dumping of that. So I believe there may be an opportunity for this board to consider some lobbying to the province in regards to not just looking at this program through the lens of the fire risks, but also to air quality, legal dumping, and all those related issues. And I would love to see the province support rural areas and municipalities in making this program more supported and universal. So I don't know if this board would have interest, but it could be interesting for us to put our minds to it in the future to see if that's something we would like to get involved with in terms of at least a communication with the province in regards to our illegal organics dumping issues and the potential role of this one that sits with fire departments as a part of the solution. Thank you.
Director Arbor, is that a motion that you want to make, or?
I would second it.
Okay, well, if there's interest from the board, hopefully it doesn't get defeated because it's on the fly. But yeah, if staff would find it useful that we ask for maybe a staff report would be a good first start. That move that we receive a staff report on the potential to advocate for a program like this.
Are we not under receipt still?
Yes.
For
Oh, sorry.
So I'll come back to you. And I see some more questions coming up, and I just want to double check. Is that if they're on the actual report or on Director Arbor's? Director Polson, sorry, is that a comment or a question that you have on the report?
It's on the report.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I'm relatively new to this committee, just having been elected in a by-election last November, but I do have an interest in the illegal dumping that goes on farther out in the rural areas. And we see reports on social media from hunters and people that are out hiking, finding things. And I'm just wondering what sort of information I can get on putting a notice up about how these volunteers can do the collecting, and for instance, are they allowed free dumping at the Campbell River site if they have to take it into Campbell River, or how does that all work? So who would I contact to get more information? I will look up at the illegal dumping site and see what's there, but I think it's something that if we can let our residents know about, that it would really help in the number of volunteers that come forward.
So just a question on process.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I volunteer to reach out to Director Polson with staff to provide that background and information in the next couple of weeks to inform you of the programs and answer any of your questions, if that will help.
Thank you very much.
Director Cornfield?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest there's a number of things that come to mind. It seems that the board is fairly interested in how we can expand or do a better job of preventing the illegal dumping, and was wondering if we could have some discussion on that matter at a future board meeting.
Madam Chair, Jake Martins has just suggested that we are planning on another roundtable with the board in June. And this could be a good topic for discussion then if the board agrees.
Okay, does it need a board resolution to do that?
Consider it as a top priority as identified by the board when staff prepare the agenda with the chair and vice chair.
Okay, but does it require a motion, like a subsequent motion?
I don't think so, not at this time.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks, Director Cornfield and Director Abram.
Yes, thank you. Actually, my comment was with regard to Director Arbor's comments. So do you want to wait till then or what?
Yes, if that's all right with you. Does anyone have any other questions left on the actual report for receipt? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. So I'm going to go back to Director Arbor.
Yeah, thank you. And I do realize, I'm wondering if we should just hold off, because item 5 does cover part of what I'm talking about. We had provided the direction in regards to the actual wood chips as a useful product. So maybe let's get through. I would propose we wait till that discussion and see if my motion is still relevant at that stage after receipt of that report.
Okay, thank you. And I see Director Abram on that topic. Oh, you're still muted, Director Abram. Okay, maybe we'll come back to you. Does anyone have any other comments?
You're muted, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
There you
I thought
go. Okay.
I unmuted. Okay, sorry about that. I was just going to say that the biggest problem with Quadra is that this Fire Smart program, the wood chipping, et cetera, it's a great program, worked great in past years, but we are now being told that those chips cannot be left in place. They have to be shipped via dump truck over to a composting facility, which, you know, has basically turned people right off from having to do it. It makes no sense whatsoever, especially, you know, in like Director Arbor's situation, my situation, where you have ferries involved and high costs, and it's just silly. Those chips can be used in landscaping. They can be used in forest fodder. Would not be, you know, necessarily creating a fire hazard if it was done properly. So I just wanted to throw that in, if that could be looked at in the report as to how we dispose of the wood chips.
Thanks, Director Abram. I think we'll probably get into that a little bit more under number 5 in the agenda. So, but that point taken. Any other questions? So we don't have any motion at the moment, and we've already received. So I will move on to the next item. It's the receipt of unsolicited organic waste processing proposal. Moved by Director Arbor.
Second.
Second by Director Grieve. And over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Vivian Shaw is here to present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Through the chair and the CEO. Following last year's Convertus's delegation to the CSWM board outlining their organic waste offerings, they have submitted an unsolicited proposal on February 8th to the CSWM board co-chairs for consideration. The regional organics facility right now has a processing capacity to accommodate about 14,500 tons per year, with the bulk of that feedstock coming from residential sources, and the balance coming from ICI sectors. So as the organic facility gets up and running, we're committed to, or staff is committed to continuing to analyze and consider long-term solutions for all organic waste within the region. As the demand outweighs the capacity, we'll continue to evaluate additional processing capacities, which may include working in partnership with either the RDN or looking for an alternate processing, another processor. So in light of the possibility of having to go to an external or procurement process, we wanted to ensure that we're maintaining a fair and equitable process as we go forward. So to that end, we've advised the Convertis group to refrain from contacting the board directly, as it may be misconstrued as, or may be considered as lobbying, which would disqualify them from future process.
Thank you for that presentation. Does anyone have questions? Yes, Director Cornfield.
And can staff please clarify why they would be restricted from contacting directors? I can see it if it's during a process, but if this is totally unsolicited or if they have ideas, why would it not be okay to contact directors?
I think the best method for sharing information with directors is through the board itself. By making a request to be a delegation in front of the board, staff can help the proponent to ensure that what they share does not compromise any procurement process or their involvement at a later date. But what we're really discouraging is especially the one-on-one meeting with directors and sharing information that could potentially be contrary to their ultimate objectives, and wanting to ensure that you have full and all available options when it comes to a procurement process, and all potential candidates are on a fair and even ground.
Yeah, I guess I have different views on it, and I see we go to conventions, there's people working the trade show floors. We often have contact with businesses and that are interested, that have new, different, innovative processes. We have discussions with them and we refer them to staff, but I don't agree with no contact with directors by companies.
Madam Chair, let me distinguish maybe what happens on a trade show floor versus what we have before you here. Is that on a trade show floor, you're being introduced to what a company provides, the types of businesses that they do, what they are doing for other municipalities. This could be perceived as a direct action to try and solicit a contract with you. They have a service on the island. The reason for them contacting the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board and its directors is to solicit a direct business relationship. It's not about that broader sharing of information that you might get on a trade room floor at a conference.
Thank you for that. Director Arbor.
Yes, I actually want to show support for what the CEO just said. I think we, as elected officials, there's always a risk that we may taint potential procurement processes. I think early on in my tenure, we had an experience that I didn't really enjoy, where we were basically being directly solicited by a potential partner of this board, and it was an uncomfortable space, because I don't think we want any directors to have more information than other directors. And actually to try, potentially skewing the deck. Sometimes there may not be a conflict of interest, but we always have to be cautious as well about perceived conflicts of interest. So I want to show support for the CEO's comments. Thanks.
Thank you. And Director Abram. Oh, you're muted again.
Jim.
There we go.
I'm sorry. Okay, I just would like to express support for Director Cornfield's comments. I believe that not just on trade floor meetings or whatever, but if somebody comes to a director and says, I've got a better mousetrap, and as long as that person is referred directly to staff at the regional district to lay out their better mousetrap to be shared with the entire board, I think that's totally appropriate. And I find it very, very strange that we would be discouraging any kind of innovation from other people that may just be out there in the public that could come forward to us and say, you know, we can do it this way rather than that way. That doesn't really give any one director any more information than another. And it's all shared directly from that proponent to the board through the staff. So I totally support that.
Madam Chair, just one more comment, and that is what was provided by Convertus was the details of the provision of a service to the regional district, including pricing and such. It is the type of information that we would solicit in a procurement process which was fair and transparent and offered to all available contractors if the board gave us direction to go down that road. So again, this really is the type of information that would compromise the process for them and us if it were to be received in this way. And we just want to advise them and advise the board that we are open to new initiatives, new ideas and such. But as a local government, we have to ensure that the processes are fair and transparent and above board.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple more
Like,
second time speakers.
Any
Go ahead,
chance of
Director
a
Avon. Yeah.
Okay, just real quick on what Mr. Dyson just said. I totally agree. You know, in situations where those kinds of details are provided, it's not inappropriate. But that then is sort of assuming that directors are not savvy enough to say, wait a minute, you're stepping over the line here. You want to bring that information to the board, bring it to the board, but good on you for coming forward. So I think we have to have some trust here that directors are going to act appropriately and act through a board that's made up of all of us.
Thank you. Director Adams.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate where staff are trying to guide us and also protect us. But through our different associations and networking, we may come across opportunities that may be of interest to fellow board members, but more importantly, staff. And I think there has to be some level of trust and competency that the board members can receive information. And perhaps it would be more appropriate to have some language that information that is received, that is unsolicited, be forwarded to staff to present to the entire board so that the information is vetted through staff, but directors may have an opportunity just by circumstance receive information that maybe staff don't, and we get it, we forward it on, but to just kind of say we're not to discuss, we're not to receive. I think I see my role as a member of council is that's what I'm supposed to do, but it's to make sure that that information is equally shared and first with staff, but then with all of the members that are responsible for that particular service. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I have a couple of second time speakers, and before we move to them, I'm just going to make a comment that, you know, I think staff are doing a really good job of just flagging this. And I just want to make the comment that I don't think we would be having this conversation if it hadn't been for the fact that this trust and the lobbying actually did take place earlier on in our, after we were first elected. So we have a clear example of how we were lobbied. So as much as we try and trust all of us to do the right thing, that doesn't always happen. I'm going to see Director Moglove.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. It seems to me there's a difference between receiving an unsolicited proposal with details as opposed to a general conversation about different ideas on a particular topic. So if a company were to come forward and say, you know what, I hear that you're looking at, waste to energy, I'm just using it as an example, but it's not a proposal. It's just sort of a general, we'd like to sort of, get involved. That to me is reasonable, but to receive an unsolicited proposal with details, that is where as our CEO has indicated, I think goes past what is acceptable and could get the board into difficulty. So I think that what we need to do perhaps is everybody be on the same page as to where that line is, and so that we can all behave, with the same rule book.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to second time speakers. And I just want to remind speakers to please present new information since you've already presented once. So I have Director Cornfield and then Director Arbor and Director Abram. Director Lee will be after that. Is that all right?
Thank you, Chair. For new information in terms of what we've got is, I look at a number of economic development opportunities that could come out of it. And as His Worship Director Adams had said, that's what's expected us as municipal politicians. Just a quick note that lobbying is not illegal. You have to be registered to be a lobbyist, but it's not an illegal activity. Unsolicited proposals, I think, is something that we need to have a greater discussion, and if necessary, create a policy on unsolicited proposals. So maybe that could be added to the roundtable discussions in June.
Madam Chair, we do have a policy, and I will take your advice and include Karen Garrett to provide a presentation of the roundtables with respect to it. Based on the discussion and questions here, it would be very valuable. And just one other little piece of information, Convertus was afforded the opportunity to come and present to you as a board and present their technology and their ideas to enable you as a board to consider whether you wanted to change your course. That was all above board. So I think things are working here, but they took the extra step to provide the details and level of information that went too far. And that's what we're bringing to your attention today.
Thank you. Director Arbor?
Thank you. Not new information, but additional perspective, perhaps. I think we need to make the distinction between policy and management. And I think I'll give an example. I could actually spend the next 2 years encouraging delegations of 20 companies to come before this board with technology that could apply to our service, and then maybe encourage them to bring forward proposals to our staff. So if we want to play that game as a board, it could be a very long term if each of us start seeking companies and delegations to come and present. The role of policy, what I would advocate is for board members who feel that they may have companies or whatnot. In the context of this discussion, the more appropriate channel would be to ask the board and get a motion from the board to see if we want to have a different path in regards to our organic master plan. And if you feel that you are not satisfied with what we currently have on deck, that you channel your own advocacy through this board to open up a request to staff to investigate alternative technologies or delivery models. If you get a motion from the board to do that, then we can empower staff to do a proper survey of all the different opportunities and organic companies that are out there. So that would be, to me, the appropriate role of a policymaker. And so I support the staff report on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Abram?
I just wanted to, sorry, a bit of levity. I'd like to note that Director Cornfield, Adams, Moglove, and myself all agreed on something.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. It's not just the companies. I think we need to have a clear policy on directors' involvement with those companies. And the chair did refer to when she was first elected, having directors like actively promoting those companies, bringing samples of their materials to the board and saying, look at this, this is a perfect material and whatnot. I think that is what makes me back off from a proposal without even having a policy saying that if the company's already infiltrated the lobbying to the directors behind closed doors, you know, as soon as a director on the board starts doing a sales pitch for a company, that turns me the other direction with that company, and it may not be fair to them, but I think directors have the responsibility to have the public's interest in mind at all times, and anything that's going to drive up, say, the cost or the quality of a service, and it's not in the public interest, we shouldn't be entertaining it. You know, so I think, you know, I don't know if it has to be a code of conduct issue, but there should be flags going up when we see any particular company being promoted at the board table.
Thank you for that. And I don't see any other new questions. So staff has already pointed out that they will be bringing up the policy that we do have for one of our roundtables. Seeing no other questions on receipt, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. And we're moving on to item number 5, the grant applications for the community fire hazard reduction and community resilience programs for receipt.
So moved.
Director Unger.
Second.
Director Cole Hamilton, thank you. And over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and James Warren is here to present this report and the recommendation and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Russell, and through the chair and to the board. So at the last board meeting in January, the board resolved to ask staff to prepare a report in conjunction with the Strathcona Regional District around the grant programs for wood chipping and the required removal of chips as part of the fire hazard reduction programs. We did have a brief conversation with the SRD, and what's before you today is a description of the wood chipping program that was conducted in the CVRD, the grant associated with that. The name of the grant in this case was the Community Resiliency Investment Program. Through the comments at the CSWM meeting in January, and also in discussions with staff in how that program was unfolded or how it was conducted, there was success in the sense that there was significant chipping that was undertaken, and I think 65 to 75 tons of wood chips were removed, which is around that community resilience piece. That said, there was local community interests that weren't being met, and I think they were reflected in today's earlier discussion around some matters like air quality. And so the resolution or the recommendation presented in the staff report would be that the board provide correspondence to that grant program. It supports the ongoing grant funds because, of course, they are helpful, but that also there'd be flexibility built to these programs to encourage those community priorities and values being recognized. And so if the staff report is recommending the resolution on the agenda, if the board is interested, it may want to just expand that a little bit to identify air quality and any other types of community values that were raised. I think the point being that there'd be some flexibility in these grant programs where multiple interests can be met. Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I have a question from Director Anderson.
Thank you. It really just is in support of what I've heard from Dr. Abram and others about how valuable these chips are to the community. And in fact, if we do this program again, we've applied for funds again for Cortes Island, there may well indeed be a private chipper that just runs around, you know, early in the morning of or the day before and gets all the slash for themselves because the chips are that valuable. It's absurd to have them leave the island, and there are certainly ways of disposing of them and keeping them and distributing them in ways that isn't going to be a fire hazard, whether that's through some kind of coordinated facility or just, you know, leaving them at people's properties if they want. So I would really love to see B, when we get to it, expanded to speak to air quality and local use of chips. And that would certainly be up to each individual community to propose, a disposal method that would meet the provincial, some kind of provincial requirement. But I think adding some specific language about that, I've certainly heard it from communities other than just in this region as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Cornfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry I keep going on, but when you chip, it's got to go somewhere, and that's fine in some jurisdictions. On some of the islands, maybe you can use your chips for a variety of different things on site, and still maintain and reduce the fire risk. When it comes inside cities like ourselves, a lot of that stuff goes to the dump. And that airspace is expensive and costs us money, but is my understanding from this report that funding can't pay for disposal fees at the landfill or whatever. So I would like to see us request that the grant funds are much broader in nature so that they cover the actual disposition of the solid waste produced.
Director Cornfield, could I just clarify, are you saying that the chips are going into the landfill?
Well, if you're going to take them from Quadra Island, and unless you get a commercial place to deposit those chips, we have a surplus of wood waste, both in the forest and at the dryland sorts. That's is a huge ongoing disposal problem. So if it doesn't go to our landfill, it's going to go to a commercial or a private one that is allowed to handle those chips. And if it's going to impact us, then the program should also provide for funding for the disposal of those chips.
Staff want to comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know where the chips in the Strathcona Regional District ended up, but in the Comox Valley, they were used by the Skyrocket program because it's valuable for that. So they were used with the biosolid processing here.
Okay, and Director who's that? Oh, sorry. I see staff have their hand up. Jesse Lee, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that in regards to the hog fuel or the wood chips at the Campbell River landfill. That doesn't get landfilled. That goes as part of our yard waste program. So even if like BC Hydro has different programs, they dispose of it at our facility. We move that down to Pacific Wood Waste, and then they compost that material. So none of the grind wood waste material ever gets landfilled.
Thank you.
Regardless of what facility it goes to, Comox Valley or Campbell River.
And who pays for that?
It's a tipping fee. So $65 a ton that material comes in, and then
right. And my point is that the tipping fee that somebody has to pay should be something. If it's a cost associated to us, the program should be enlarged in its scope of funding to properly deal with it, which is composting, which is a good idea.
Thank you for that. Director Abram.
Once again, unmuted. This time, agreeing with Director Cornfield again. Yes, we should receive some sort of compensation for that, but stepping it back a couple of steps, we shouldn't have to move it. Just the act of gathering, moving, paying for all of the fuel, etc., to transport these goods makes no sense. We're just basically adding more of a larger carbon footprint to our area. So we're supposedly doing good on one hand, but on the other we're doing bad. So I just don't think it's a good idea. I think people on the islands the island that I live on and the other islands that I represent feel that it would be far better for people to be able to use this valuable material for their own use. I have a 60 by 80 foot garden out in the back here. It's got 6 inches of wood chips on it. So, am I a fire hazard? I don't think so. But I would certainly appreciate good wood chips. Right now I buy them at a huge cost and to grow vegetables. So, it just makes no sense to me to grind them up, haul them long distances on the island, because they're coming like from the North Island south to the ferry, wait in the ferry lineup, take them over to either Campbell River or wherever. Great use, skyrocket, but if they're there for skyrocket, great. But if you have to bring them there, I don't think it's a good idea.
Thank you. And I have Director Arbor, who's hopefully going to explain a good project that happens on Hornby.
Well, maybe. The good thing, I think the good thing about this program is it is a new program. So let's celebrate the fact that we're actually getting the opportunity to experiment with it. And in regards to the discussion about whether to take it or leave it, I'm firmly entrenched in the Dr. Abrams camp because I'm on Hornby. But at the same time, I realize it doesn't have to be an either or. You could over time develop a program where there's the option to homeowners whether they actually keep the chips or whether it gets chips in the back of the truck. And so you could have a system whereby the homeowners actually chooses whether they retain the materials, or if they're in the municipal areas and they don't have the use for the chips, it gets taken away. So we're at the start of something, but I want to make sure that that something continues. And I've been thinking since item 2 or 3 there, that if the board's interested, maybe I'll change my motion for my proposed motion after this from a letter to the government advocating for this, to maybe carry this discussion into our roundtable in June, and maybe to ask staff to, in the interim, to seek from the province to see if they too have larger ambitions around this program. So we have some better information to inform our discussion around both how the program works in the future and its linkages to our other issues like illegal dumping and air quality issues. So I'll probably, if that's okay, that's the way I'm leaning, is just to refer it to our, or to ask that this item be considered in fulsome way at our June roundtable, if there's support for that.
Thank you. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to advocate for an expanded program. Not just for the rural communities, but also for the municipalities. As has been mentioned, the illegal dumping costs, air quality. When you look at homeowners that are making with their pickup truck 10 trips from their home up to the dump to carry a pile of brush, it's just not an efficient way of moving it. And you expand that by all the different homes within a urban community, you've got something that just is totally inefficient. So I'd certainly advocate for an expanded program and some different way of dealing with, brush, branches, that sort of thing takes up a lot of airspace, not just in dumps, but in vehicles and transportation vehicles. So if there was a gathering place where they could be chipped and then moved as chips rather than brush, it would certainly be a more efficient way of doing our job.
Thank you. We're creating some more discussion now. So I see Director Anderson and then Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just reading in the last page of the report, page 3, the end of the second paragraph. Wood chips were removed to either the waste management facility in Cumberland or a compost facility in Hornby. I would love to hear from staff what the compost facility on Hornby is. Is it ours? Is it a nonprofit's? How did it qualify as an appropriate facility to leave the chips at? And how can we expand that program or sort of that kind of method immediately? Because I know the applications are in right now for 2021 for this program. And certainly if we have a roundtable in June, that's fantastic. But for this season of program, if any of our communities are successful in receiving funds again, is there any way that we could immediately expand on the good work that Hornby has apparently been doing for some of the other communities that are interested in keeping the chips. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll just ask Jesse Lee if he could provide some information with respect to what exists on Hornby.
Over to you, Jesse.
Yeah, hi, to the CEO. So the program on Hornby was just a small, last year was the first time they did that grinding program. So they've had historically a small little leaf kind of small yard waste kind of compost operation. It's very passive. It's just a few rotations. It's not a large amount of volume. So this year we watched to see what would be used as far as the volumes of chips and if it was possible to do that. So we did do that this year over there. Is it a long-term solution? I don't know. We'll see how it goes in the future. But it wasn't a large amount this year, so it was something that they were able to utilize there on site. There is some stipulations that sorry, this is one. I know there is some stipulations where, and I just started getting involved with that program a little bit last year, but where it has to go in the kind of receiving facility, like you noted. So we'll have to make sure if the volumes were to increase, it would have to be reviewed.
So just to follow up, was that then at the recycling center on Hornby?
Yes.
Because when this program first rolled out last year, I inquired with our staff at the CSWM whether there would be some way of receiving these chips at the recycling center on Cortes Island. Now, it was very last minute. It was, the week before the program when we realized that these chips needed to leave the island. And it was deemed that there wasn't, I don't know, appropriate space, or we didn't have a composting facility. I'm not quite sure what. But I can guarantee that if there is some way of formally receiving these chips, they would be gone 3 days later. Like, people would pick them up if they were for free. So I would just ask that if there's any possible way staff could work with communities in the 2021 year to find ways of formally receiving these chips in some of our communities at quote unquote designated official disposal facilities, perhaps even some of the smaller municipalities where there's a transfer station that could happen. And then perhaps there's a volunteer group that could coordinate the very quick dispersal of them. Any support for the 2021 year would be so gratefully received.
Yeah, we did inquire with that group when they reached out to us, but they were, I don't know, maybe that was just because they were at the beginning. They did, I think it was July or something. Was it June on Cortes, I believe? Anyways, they were adamant that they wanted to take it off the island. So we did inquire about, a small amount. But anyways, that was the way that program was running. That was the way that contract was issued, I guess, through the province. I'm not that familiar with it. But
I think, and just a last comment, I think it was because we didn't have a designated official composting facility or solid waste management disposal facility. And so if there's any way of actually designating some of our transfer stations as that facility, even if it was to receive the chips for a few days, I just think there might be a creative workaround if in fact Hornby figured out a way of doing it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Jesse, did you have another comment?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, I believe James has a comment.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that if the board does,
Sorry, Director Unger, could you just mute?
If the board supports the recommendation or a version of the recommendation that expands a little bit to consider things like air quality and the reuse of valuable materials, and we would certainly share that letter to the province, would share that letter with the SRD and encourage, much to Director Anderson's point, the application of those grants on the communities most impacted and looking for those flexible and creative opportunities to make use of the chips in a local setting.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion on receipt. I don't see any other questions. Oh, sorry, Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure that this issue is generating discussion at regional districts all over BC. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was touched on at the UBCM Electoral Area Forum. So, I see where this is something we have to get back to the ministry. And what ministry is it? Is it the ministry, or is it the BC Fire Commissioner's office? BC Fire Commissioner's office? I'm getting an echo. There we go. I can't remember. Like Elvis. So I'm just thinking this probably looks like a good idea to some mid-level ministry staffer that lives in Oak Bay on the 3rd floor of an apartment. But you know, when the rubber hits the road, there's a couple of holes here that need to be plugged. So I think we have to make our position known to the BC government and kind of point out that this is a valuable resource that is needed for bedding for livestock, is needed for agricultural use. And, you know, maybe just rethink this whole, because so many wins here, you know, we got air quality wins, we got, you know, just like you say, people filling up pickup trucks and driving up to the landfill. I mean, that just goes against what we're trying to work for. So I think that if we can work at that level and maybe even come up with a UBCM resolution for the fall, and get our associations to lobby the government to take a broader look at this. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Green. If I could just remind participants on Zoom to just keep yourself muted. I think when you unmute and another speaker is speaking, that's where we're getting some of the feedback here. On receipt, is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Now, we do have a recommendation which asks that the grant funding program provide flexibility in the application of funds. And hearing the discussion that we've had, I'm just wondering if this recommendation is enough to cover what we're asking for. Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. And I know it's never ideal, especially with a big board like this, to start amending proposed recommendation, but I've been thinking about it since item 2. And what I propose is that we keep the recommendation as is, but add a point C. And that point C would basically, I might need some word crafting from staff to keep it an efficient point C, but basically in that correspondence with the ministry to seek more information about their intent around the growth, the future growth of this program, so as to inform a discussion we would have at the roundtable on the topic. I don't know if that, I mean, I'm really trying to distill it to something that, what I'm hearing is that's actually something that all of us seem to agree on the value of this program, and that we all have great ideas about how to carry it forward. But that might be an additional item, because I do agree with Dr. Grieve that there may be multiple avenues for the long term that we should pursue, so the province realizes how keen we are on the program, and other elements that could be considered moving forward.
Okay, so I have Director Arbour with a motion to add a C section, seeking more information on the intent. Seconded by Director Cornfield. Okay, are there any other comments or questions around that amended recommendation? Director Cornfield?
Would it be possible to, and not having seen the agenda or the format for the round table, but would it be possible that the ministry could be in attendance or could give us a presentation on the program beforehand, before the round table or during the round table?
Yeah, we can explore that for the round table by all means, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Anderson, and then Director Green.
Thank you. I would like to offer a simple amendment to the end of item B. Just an additional word that says, so after upheld, a comma. Sorry, it's fun. Local community values recognized and upheld, especially that of wood chip retention in rural communities.
Second.
And that's seconded. So sorry, do we need to vote on it? Okay, I think instead of voting on the First Amendment and I'm just going to ask if the board would be all right with us making these amendments and then approving them all at the end. We have that motion that has been presented and seconded. Is there anyone concerned about that amendment? So sorry, Director Anderson, it was especially that of wood chip
retention in rural communities.
Okay, retention in rural communities. And I will have staff bring up the full recommendation. I have Director Grieve and then Director Kerr.
Yes, sorry about that, but I actually might have missed it, but what ministry are we talking about?
Flinrod? Pardon me, Flinrod, Forest Lands Resource.
No, this is the Community Resiliency Investment Program, and it comes from Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Sorry.
That may be an issue.
Okay, Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And if we're going to start making amendments, be more specific, I'd certainly like to see, expanding the community to include, or expanding the program to include the urban communities also. So, I don't know how far we want to go down the rabbit hole in terms of being specific, but certainly if we want to give some direction, we should maybe consider that.
Sure, thank you.
I would
It sounds
consider
like
that.
that might be an amendment to Director Anderson's comment. If we took out rural and just kept, especially that of wood chip retention in communities, would that be acceptable?
Totally fine, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Boy, we're good.
We're good at word crafting. And just while staff are putting that up on the screen, we're just going to wait a second, sorry. And Director Cornfield, do you have another question?
Yeah, it's a process one. So Director Arbor had added a C.
Yep.
Is the idea that then the full motion with everybody else's wordsmithing and amendments, we're going to roll them all in as one thing and then look at the combined amended motion as opposed to dealing them one at a time?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. In communities. Okay. And Director Arbor, I think you have a comment about your item C.
Yeah, you made me laugh, Chair, when you said I added a C-section, but seek on the C, I think seek more information on their intent for future growth of the program. And then I think I had added towards a fuller discussion at the round table in June. I don't know if we need that part or if staff is satisfied that just like this is fine. Okay, just checking on that. Thank you. So I'm fine with what's on the screen.
Should do it as part of the motion, then it's clear.
Yeah. Oh, you want it as part? Okay, sorry.
Yes, please.
I don't think there's a cost in saying that we will consider that information at the roundtable. So if we can add it, then that would definitely capture what I spoke above.
Okay, because I'm just double checking because it looks like it's a communication outward, and your item C, like the clause that you're wanting to add is internal. Is that does that still make sense to keep it there?
If I can, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I'm just going to recognize Director Arbor and then Director Cornfield.
Yeah, the reason I have part of my thinking why I had it towards further discussion at round table is that also signals to the ministry that we would like this information ahead of that, and that gives a date that everybody can works on. But so I didn't see its internal and external purposes for me.
Director Cornfield and then Director Adams.
Yeah, I think it's really important that that we referral, and then this is in support and why I seconded Director Arbor's motion or amendment to the motion. I think it's really important, and it shouldn't just be limited to the emergency program people. Flinro deals with all forest land, which is where a lot of the illegal dumping occurs. It's also in charge of the program for joint firefighting. It's usually done through the Wildfire BC. So I think as long as they seeks more information from the government on their intent for future growth of the program.
Okay, thank you. Director Adams?
Thank you, Chair. And certainly no disrespect to the chair, but I'm struggling with what we are doing right here.
We are wordsmithing on the fly.
Yes.
And yes, we've kind of broken down Robert's rules so that we have a full recommendation with a few changes, and we're going to approve the entire thing.
I appreciate that, but I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate action that we should be taking, or whether when we get into this level of minutia, that it be deferred and members of the board provide their suggestions and comments to staff, and staff put together a report with options and alternatives for the next board meeting. Just my observation and comment.
Okay, thank you. It is a good plan, and I think we'll judge by the vote how people are feeling. Director Abram?
Yeah, I don't mean to disagree with Director Adams, but I think that we're very close to having it ready to go. So why don't we just go?
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the room or online. So I hope everyone can see the recommendation that we have has been moved and seconded. Would you like it read out? Okay.
It's posted.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'll just quickly read out the resolution that's been moved in second. So that the board provide correspondence to the Community Resiliency Investment Program that supports the ongoing grant funds to improve community resilience and reduce hazards, and B, encourages the grant funding program provides flexibility in the application of the funds such that both program and local community values are recognized and upheld, and especially that wood chip retention in communities. And finally, C, seeks more information on their intent for future growth of the program to inform the upcoming roundtable session.
Okay, I hope everyone got that. So on the recommendation, is anyone opposed? And sorry, we're just going to pull up the hearing and seeing none. That is carried. Thank you, everybody, for your flexibility on us putting that together. All right, I'm just wondering how the board is feeling. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to take a break? Okay, 5-minute break. Okay, just stretch your legs, bathroom break, and we will be back at, let's say, 11:15. Thank you. All right, I will call the meeting back to order. It's 11:15. We have just a couple more items left. So the first one is the 2021-2025 recommended financial plan for function 391 for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved by Director
Second.
Durian. And that was, I think, Director Morin. And over to staff, please.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Mark Rutten will provide an outline of this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much through the CAO and through the chair. So this is the final presentation for this year's financial plan. This is the recommended plan. Thanks, Jake. So the first slide here, this shows the financial planning process that we have followed. So back in January, we presented, back in 2020, we presented a preliminary plan. Then in January, the proposed plan. And now we are recommending now we are presenting the recommended plan. The financial planning process is guided by policy for the Solid Waste Board. And sorry, I should have corrected that to recommended plan from proposed. Apologies for that. This slide is from one of the earlier presentations, but I wanted to put it in here just to remind the board and provide the highlights of this particular financial plan. The budget includes a $1 million reduction in taxation, and a detailed review shows that this reduction is sustainable across all 5 years of the financial plan. The tipping fees are recommended to stay at 140 in 2021 and then be reviewed in future years. Operating costs are reduced, and these were reduced as per the COVID-19 renewal work, and are able to stay at this reduced level for 2021. And the small graph here shows that most of our most of our revenue comes from tipping fees and taxation in this service. So budget changes. So there were no changes requested by the board at the last meeting. So we have not made any budget changes, but we have made some adjustments to turn the budget from proposed into recommended. And those adjustments are surplus. So we did have a surplus in 2020 generated from higher than anticipated tipping fees and reduced cost due to the COVID rethink work. And so that surplus has been allocated to closure reserve fund. Also, support services came in lower in 2020 than anticipated. That created a surplus within the support services service, and that has created a reduction in support services in 2021. So that's now reflected in the recommended financial plan. And then the third item to highlight in terms of an adjustment is that carry forwards increased by 20,000. And that was for an electrical upgrade that we're making at the Comox Valley Waste Management Center. We started that work in 2020, but we'll be finishing it in 2021. So a small carry forward required there. On the capital side, the capital program has not changed, but there are some projects that we're carrying forward from last year. So these are now adjusted in the recommended plan. And just a quick highlight on each of those. The public drop-off facility or the recycling facility at Comox Valley. We started an upgrade there in late 2019. We worked on that through 2020. And we'll be finishing it early in the new year. So that project's almost done, but we did have to carry forward some small amount of funding. Roll-off bins that we had budgeted in 2020, we did not purchase them. We managed to continue to use them for the year, but we do plan to complete that project in 2021. So that's been carried forward. A litter vacuum was included in the 2020 plan. We did not purchase that last year, but have carried it forward. and a roll-off truck that we also had planned for last year, but we were able to continue to use the truck that we had, but do plan to replace that in 2021. So these aren't changes. These were items that were already included in the plan, but have been carried forward to 2021. This slide here is also a repeat of a previous slide, but it helps to kind of summarize the larger capital projects that will be coming in the next few years. As you can see, Regional Organics is a large project. It's funded by grants and reserves. The landfill closure in Campbell River, also a large project funded by debt. And then Cell 2 at Comox Valley, funded by reserves. So these projects will be, Regional Organics will be constructing in 2021 and early 2022. The landfill closure design in 2021, construction in 2022. And for Cell 2, also design in 2021, construction in 2022. As a result of the increased debt for the Campbell River closure, debt costs do increase in the financial plan, debt servicing costs. I've added this slide here to just show reserve balances. So you can see graphically here that our reserves are very healthy right now with closing reserve values near 25 million at the end of 2020. And then we do draw those down over the next 2 years to complete the organics project and the Cell 2 project. And then you can see that reserves are quite stable for a couple of years as we make large contributions, but also complete closure projects in Tassus and Zabelis, so things stay pretty stable. And then in future years, which you can't see on this graph, but 2026 and 2027 reserves begin to grow again. So those are the highlights of the recommended plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mark. And does anyone have questions on the financial plan? Director Lee?
Okay, so that 1.6 million in reserves that you're going to put towards into the reserve fund for closure plans, is that a restricted reserve or is that fluid? Like if something else came up where you want to purchase something else that's floating around out there, can you just like move that money around, or does the board take some decided action to make the reserves restricted to a certain expenditure, such as the closures? The reason I'm asking is that, you know, in the hospital board, we put monies into reserves knowing that the hospitals were not built big enough, and in future we may have to expand. And I understood those to be restricted reserves, but apparently now Island Health is going after that money for their projects. And it's disturbing that those funds are considered to be unrestricted. I don't know how they turned from restricted to unrestricted, but if we're going to say to the public, we're taxing you, we're going to use the money for such and such, then that money should be designated as restricted to that purpose, in my opinion. So the 1.6 million in reserves, is that going to be put into the closure plan of the landfills and restricted to that?
Yes. Yeah, there are 3 reserve funds. One is called a Funds for Future Expenditure Reserve. One is called the Capital Works Reserve, and one is a Closure Reserve. The Funds for Future Expenditure Reserve has a very broad scope. The funds can be used for operations, for maintenance, for capital projects, for just about anything. So it's very broad. The other 2 reserves, the Capital Works Reserves, can only be used for capital projects, and the Closure Reserve only used for closure projects.
Thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Mark. I don't see any other questions. I'll just give a couple minutes or a couple seconds. Seeing none. Oh, Director Grieve, was that a question or you just a tick? Okay, so on receipt for the financial plan for functions 391 to 393, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried.
Opposed.
Okay, so we have Director,
Opposed.
oh, sorry, Director Abram is opposed, and we note that. Okay, thank you. We have a recommendation number 1 for the board for the financial plan that, sorry, I'm gonna read it out.
Number 1.
Thanks for moving 1 and seconded. Steph, see, okay. And I'm just gonna read it out that the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board endorse the recommended 2021 capital procurement as outlined in table 1 of March 3rd financial plan staff report. So it's moved and seconded. Any comments? All right, seeing none, is anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Director Abram? Okay, and seeing, then that is carried. We have a second recommendation moved by Director Arbor and Director Lee that the recommended 2021-2025 financial plan for the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Services functions 391 to 393 be approved. Does anyone have comments on that recommendation? Seeing none, is anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Director Abram. Okay, and that is carried. Last item, we have the Comox Strathcona CSWM management report for receipt for March 2021.
Move receipt.
Moved by Director Adams,
Second.
second by Director Hillian. Does staff have comments? Does anyone have questions on that management report? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Is anyone opposed to receipt? And that is carried. Would someone like to move termination?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Director Lee and Director Grieve. Anyone opposed to termination? Hearing none.